Living in Caithness are demanding that the government gives it the help and protection islands receive under the Islands Bill. It comes as fears mount over cuts in services and depopulation. Figures released project that the county could see a 20% decrease in its population over the next 20 years. It's now claimed the area, once home to the flourishing herring, flagstones and nuclear industries, is on the slide. Jackie O'Brien reports from Thurso.
It's a wet, grey day in Thurso, and the hopes of local shopkeepers are set to be brightened with the arrival of a cruise ship full of tourists and road trippers already travelling the North Coast 500. But there's an obstacle in their way.
There is no tourist information, and that's bizarre.
It's incomprehensible that you would have tourists coming through on something like the 500 and no information for them when they arrive. It's just astounding. It's almost as if they don't want us here.
We do.
I think it's extraordinary just because if you've got a lot of people coming through, they're going to want information on where to stay and where to eat, and there isn't anywhere, and actually it's still marked on the map as information.
The closure of Visit Scotland's Tourist Information Centre remains as much of a shock to locals. It was triggered by the sudden demise of Thurso's trust-run museum and gallery, which was forced to close its doors due to financial pressures in February.
We're walking through the precinct in Thurso. We're outside Caithness Horizons that's unfortunately closed at the moment, although the council who own the building, we are determined to get it reopened as soon as possible. We'd love it if Visit Scotland came back and reopened the tourist information, but that doesn't seem to be going to happen.
Local councillor Matthew Rees is leading a new charge to reverse the decline at a time when certain services are centralised or cut back.
We don't want to be abandoned, and we feel there are a lot of simple things that actually wouldn't cost a lot of money that could still be done. Bringing back the Visit Scotland tourist information is just one example. It's very, very basic, and it's a bit like the banks and the post offices and other services withdrawing. Yes, I understand the economics of these things, but in the remote areas they need something extra, and again, if you look to the islands, they do have something extra with the legislation that protects the islands and gives them a bit of extra money. My own view is Caithness in many ways should be treated as an island. We're over 100 miles from Inverness, and that's a big challenge.
So I'm looking for something that shows the whole of Caithness, all the roads, and I don't know. I was looking for an OS map really, but I don't have that. But I do have. These are more street maps.
One local woman is taking matters into her own hands. In a bid to rescue bewildered tourists, Laura Freeman has set up her own information service in her gift shop, iCandy.
Oh, there's so much potential here. So much. Things that haven't even been looked into, like the Brochs and all the cairns, and apparently there's a settlement that's supposedly just as big as Scarborough, if not bigger, which hasn't been developed. There's so much here that could be done, and just is forgotten about, or with the North Coast 500, there's no signposts that could be fixed straight away. There's so much that could be developed here, but I don't understand why nobody's actually doing anything.
But as locals try their best to bring tourists into Caithness, more and more inhabitants are due to leave the county. Highland Council's latest projections show that the county could lose 21% of its population by 2041. 30-year-old Pranjali Christian and her family have already left Caithness for healthcare reasons. Cuts in local maternity services meant the chemistry teacher had to be rushed in labour from Caithness to Inverness in the back of a friend's car.
I was genuinely expecting that the baby would be born in Vic, because even in India, which like where we are from, it is very easy to get like maternity care like within half an hour of where you're living. And it was a real surprise to me when they told me, that your baby will be born in Inverness, and you'll have to go there and all those arrangements. And we started panicking, both of us, because none of us drive, and we were just like, how are we going to do this?
The hemorrhage of people and public services has even prompted calls for the Dounreay nuclear site, currently being decommissioned, to be brought back to life, should Britain embrace the use of more compact nuclear reactors.
I think they could be part of the energy mix because you need something to give you base load. If the wind stops blowing or the sun's not shining, something needs to fill that. We have a workforce here that could do that. If the government did decide to bring them back, there is absolutely no doubt this is a place that has the skills, has the know-how, and perhaps even more importantly, I think the vast majority of people would welcome it.
The ideas, just like the tourists, keep on coming, but local campaigners say government help is now needed to reboot this far north county.
That's Jackie O'Brien reporting for us from Thurso. Well, joining us now, Professor Jim Hunter, who's a specialist in the history of the Highlands. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Should say also you're a former chair of Highlands and Islands Enterprise. You're involved with Crofters Commission, Egg Trust. So basically, you know your stuff, Jim. What is going on?
Well, I think what's going on is runaway centralisation of services of all kinds. If you take Caithness, for instance, not that many years ago, it had a county council. Then, when that was done away with, it had a district council, it had flourishing town councils in Wick and Thurso. They've all gone. All power over local government decision-making is now centred in Inverness, which, as one of the speakers said to Jackie a moment ago, is a long, long way from Caithness. And that's been an ongoing process for some quite considerable time, and it's, if anything, accelerated under the jurisdiction of the present Scottish Government.
But would there be any more money if you decoupled back into Caithness, if you decoupled from Highland Council back into Caithness? Would there actually be any more cash on the ground for the sort of developments that people locally want to see?
Well, I think there would be cash, but I think far more important in the first instance is simply to create a mechanism where people with their feet on the ground in the locality can have real say, real input into decisions that are being taken about the place, and that these decisions should be taken a long, long way away. It's a bit ironic that the Scottish Government, and I should perhaps declare that I'm a member of the SNP, but it's a bit ironic that the Scottish Government is so insistent that power must be moved from London to Scotland, and yet at the same time within Scotland itself they're pursuing a highly centralist agenda which has deprived localities like Caithness of all say in their own affairs. It's a quite remarkable situation.
So it's not just Caithness, you feel, in the Highlands?
Well, it's not just Caithness, but I think Caithness, because of its distance from Inverness, is a particularly striking example of this. Yeah. But also, I think what's often overlooked is that Caithness has its own unique identity. People there, with good reason historically, have felt themselves for a long time to be folk who have their own culture, their own way of looking at things, their own literature and all the rest. And nothing of that now is recognised in any way institutionally whatsoever. And all the time, as was said with regard to maternity services, the position's getting worse rather than better.
And do you think then on the financial side that an island status allowance would be a way forward, an acceptance that there are special considerations in the north?
Yes, but I think it's a much more general problem than that. That would certainly be a move in the right direction. But we're not talking here just about Caithness. We're talking about the fact that though Scotland is a small country, it's a highly diverse one, and yet we have a situation where local government is very often very far removed from the places where it operates. If you take Highland Council as a whole, for instance, it runs an area getting on for being as big as Belgium, from Ardnamurchan at one extreme to Jonagroats at the other. It takes a whole day to get from one end of the area to the next. Now, that's absurd.
They do have councillors, though, in Highland Council, and I remember, when I was reporting from Highland Council, there would be quite a bit of hostility between, Caithness councillors and sometimes HIE, as it was at the time. They saw they were fighting their own patch, but do you think that's eroded then over time, or what's the dynamic there that's not working?
Well, I think what's not working is simply the fact that Caithness councillors are bound to be in a minority in Inverness, and there is no mechanism that enables them to have real jurisdiction over what they feel is important in Caithness. HIE itself, it's quite a long time since I was involved with HIE, but it then had a devolved structure.
Yeah.
There was a Caithness and Sutherland Enterprise Company. That's all gone, and also HIE's own powers and budget has been reduced considerably by the Scottish Government. So I think this is a problem that, yes, it's particularly acute in Caithness, but I think if you talk to people in parts of the southwest, the borders, the northeast, they would feel the same sense of remoteness, the same sense of loss of local power and autonomy, and I think that needs to be addressed.
And also this frustration that there's so much energy on the ground, local communities very committed to building up the community, making all sorts of options sustainable, and yet they seem to keep hitting brick walls when they try to get things off the ground.
Well, I think that's right, and the fact that there is that energy there, it needs to be tapped into, and that needs to have institutional structures made available that enables that sort of enthusiasm to get things done, to actually be able to operate, rather than to have people constantly frustrated by the fact that their ideas, they feel, are not being listened to in the centres where their lives are being increasingly run from.
Professor Jim Hunter, thank you very much indeed for that, Jim.
It was a bright